Iran on Sunday sanctioned what is described as 15 American companies, alleging they support terrorism, repression, and Israel's occupation of land Palestinians want for a future state. This action is likely in retaliation for sanctions earlier announced by the U.S. A foreign ministry statement said the sanctions barred companies from any agreements with Iranian firms and that former and current directors would not be eligible for visas.
Explosions ripped through a crowd in Bangladesh on Saturday, killing 6 people, including 2 police officers. The blasts happened during an operation by Bangladeshi commandos on an Islamic extremist hideout in Sylhet. ISIL has claimed responsibility for the explosions, including a suicide bombing at a security checkpoint near the airport on Friday. ISIL has allegedly been responsible for a wave of killings in Bangladesh since 2015, including a major attack on a cafe last year, which left 22 dead. However, the government denies that ISIL has any presence in the country and argues that a new fraction of a homegrown extremists was behind the attacks.
According to CNN, 16 of 29 inmates are still on the run after they made an audacious escape by tunneling underneath the Mexican prison wall. Tamaulipas State Secretariat of Security said Saturday that the inmates escaped Thursday from a prison in Ciudad Victoria. Following the escape, security officials destroyed unauthorized shelters constructed by inmates on prison grounds and searched cells. In reaction to those efforts, a riot broke out in the prison Friday night. 3 inmates were stabbed to death and 1 was injured. The tunnel was sealed with concrete on Saturday.
There can possibly be no better place to celebrate the EU's 60th birthday than from its democratic heart. Now, here on the steps of the European Parliament seat here in Brussels, crowds of people from the length and breadth of EU countries have turned up in force to join in the birthday celebrations. Now, in Brussels, as no doubt all across the EU, today will be all about unity.
I'm half English and half French, and I was born in Belgium. Without Europe, I wouldn't be here.
I think the European Union has fundamentally been a big part of the reason that we've had peace in Europe for more than 60 years.
It's time to show that we believe in the project and that even if there is need for improvement, there are many things to be said which are very, very positive. And it's a good thing not only to do the bashing of Europe, but also to show that many things have been marvelous about the European Union and we should continue our way.
But these celebrations belie a bittersweet reality. In just a mere 4 days, the British Prime Minister will trigger the formal process of divorce proceedings and end decades of historical unity. The EU is without a doubt at a crossroads, needing to forge a new path that is inclusive of all 27 members that will remain post-Brexit to stop the rot of disenfranchisement.
Along the Pan American Highway, life in the open. When the first landslide struck Guarmey 10 days ago, Clery Navarrete and her relatives had no choice but to run to their rooftop.
The water came in so fast that my nephew shouted, "Run, you're going to die." We were dragged out and brought up here.
Clery and her husband Alcides lost what they couldn't carry upstairs. The rooftop has turned into a kitchen, bedroom and living room for 10 people. But after more than a week of sleeping in the open, they say they don't want to leave.
We're afraid we'll get robbed. We can't leave our things.
Not since 1970, when a devastating earthquake struck this north-central region of Peru, have people lived through an emergency of this sort. At least 4 consecutive landslides have left this region under water, mud and debris. For more than a week, people have been trying to wash out the sludge and water. It's a group task to sweep it, carry it, and dump it out. And still, there is more mud and desperation. Most people have nowhere to cook. Flood victims have to rely on handouts. Most in this city of nearly 40,000 are poor.
Look at how large the disaster is. We need blankets and food for the children.
But many victims are overwhelmed. Alcides Farromeque says the aid distribution is chaotic.
The help we get is the one we need to chase here and there. The government hasn't delivered anything house to house.
The government says it's committing all of its resources to getting things back to normal. The power has been partly restored, and one of the government's priorities here in Guarmey is to get the only hospital, which was completely damaged, running again. The military is directing rescue operations in areas still isolated. Defense Minister Jorge Nieto says the task is enormous.
Our problem now is the highlands. Our helicopters will be going to those areas to take food and medicine.
The government says cleaning up the rubbish and spraying to prevent contamination will be as challenging as building trust.
We are in an emergency, but if we don't give people hope that we will keep our promises, there will be a lot of anguish.
Back on the rooftop, Alcides and his relatives say they don't feel reassured, so they set up another tent on their roof, hoping, like everyone else here, that the worst of the storm is over. Mariana Sanchez, Al Jazeera, Guarmey, Peru.
California Governor Jerry Brown is speaking out against President Trump. NBC News reports that despite some recent threats from the president to try to use federal funding as a weapon against the state, if it voted to become a sanctuary state, the Democratic governor ushered a tough rebuttal in an interview with NBC's Meet the Press this week. Brown claimed President Trump's desire for a border wall has a lot of odor here of kind of a strong man, kind of a world where you want the ultimate leader here to be doing all this stuff. And having a wall locking the people in is one of those characteristics.
According to the Associated Press, Spanish police have arrested 2 men for allegedly transporting large amounts of cocaine inside of fake bananas. Spain's Civil Guard had made the arrests after an investigation that had started in November when agents discovered the drugs in a shipment of bananas. Among the real bananas, police had found 57 fake bananas that were stuffed with 15.4 pounds of cocaine. Another 22 pounds of cocaine had been hidden inside the flaps of the cardboard boxes that were transporting the fruit. The 2 men have been charged with trafficking drugs.
Some of Eastern Africa's regional heads and international donors meeting to plan a joint strategy for the Somalia refugee crisis. Their countries host about 900,000 refugees. There are more than 1 million more people displaced inside Somalia, with the number expected to rise because of an ongoing drought. The leaders resolved to cooperate more in order to bring stability and resolve the humanitarian situation so that refugees can voluntarily go back home.
Tragically, some have lived in the camps for 3 generations, all because the environment was not conducive enough in Somalia for them to return. The current drought and the looming famine pose yet another challenge to voluntarily to return. We must not leave stone unturned to avert another famine in Somalia.
Resolutions made here were not new, but all agree that international funding has been a big problem.
It is crucial that the lukewarm support and lack of focused attention on Somalia that we have witnessed in the last 2 decades becomes a matter of the past. The solutions that will emerge from our deliberations today do not belong to IGAD alone. They should be owned fully and supported by the entire international community.
At the Dadaab refugee camp, hundreds of refugees are leaving for Somalia almost every day. On this day, it's around 600.
We are going to try our luck because the country has new leadership now. That's our hope. There's nowhere better than home. I love my country.
The camp now has just about 260,000 refugees. Many who came in the 90s or those who were born here want to stay, but they say they don't feel welcome anymore.
They still get their food supplies and cash transfers from the World Food Program. The money helps them buy fresh vegetables, meats and fruits. But WFP has reduced rations by half because of budget cuts, and refugees here say what they get now is not enough.
Back at the reception center, they start their journey back to a country where parts are still unsafe. Some to join many other Somalis who are internally displaced and a drought that has killed people and their livestock. But they tell us it's home. Catherine Soy, Al Jazeera, Dadaab, northeastern Kenya.
Ebola came here, in our little village. Then the white men and the government came and visited and made big promises. Nothing has changed. Ebola has destroyed us.
Tell me I might go to the well to get water, where they are getting water from. If I take money to even purchase, they don't even accept it. Money to go purchase something from them, they'll say no, they don't want it.
Acres of farmland lies useless and unfarmable. Pollution from nearby Israeli factories built on Palestinian land has damaged the soil, and now it's overgrown and the trees are dying. In the occupied West Bank, there are 32 industrial zones that have taken over fertile farmland. Research has only just begun on how many acres have been polluted, but it could run into the hundreds, according to Palestinian Authority sources. Many farmers have given up and moved on. Not Fayez Tanib. Instead, he learned about organic farming and now thrives despite being surrounded by the separation wall and Israeli factories. For him, the farm is an act of resistance against the occupation.
We have a mission. Our mission is to make use of all natural resources, which includes water, nutrition, and energy, and use them in such a way that we save money and we're able to stay here.
For the Palestinian Authority, the reason Israeli factories opened in the occupied West Bank is simple.
Most of the industries are based around the chemicals, and they're dangerous industries. And everybody knows those factories and industrial settlements are not subject to Israeli environmental laws with regards to inspections and standards, so they move our factories here and enslave our workers.
The local community tolerate the factories because they're a source of much-needed income. For Israeli businesses, the villages around here are a source of cheap labour and therefore bigger profits. Al Jazeera asked factory owners in the local area for comment. None was given. The World Bank says Israeli businesses in the occupied West Bank are worth at least $300 million a year. That's roughly half of the budget deficit of the Palestinian Authority. Imran Khan, Al Jazeera, Tulkarm.
Now, religious leaders from China, Laos, Cambodia, and other Asian countries also met on the sidelines of this year's Boao Forum. They discussed ways to enhance mutual trust in cultural exchanges. Yin Shun, the vice chairman of China's Buddhism Association, said the vision of China's Belt and Road Initiative not only involves monetary circulation and the communication of policies, but also understanding between peoples. Leaders agree that religious beliefs can enhance a sense of identity and better promote cultural exchanges.
Although we wear different kinds of clothes and speak different languages, our hearts are connected, and so are our wishes. There is no difference in our benevolence toward the world, our homeland, and the people.
The protests and the detentions started in Russia's Far East. Crowds in Vladivostok booed and chanted shame as people were dragged away. They'd answered Alexei Navalny's call to speak out against corruption, and so did Russians in towns and cities across this huge country. Estimates suggest these are the biggest unsanctioned protests in 5 years. Ordinary people spoke with anger about their poverty.
I don't have my own apartment, even though my husband works day and night. Putin and Medvedev tell us, you wait, you'll get an affordable mortgage, you will get everything, be patient and wait. Why does he live in a villa? Why do we live in state housing?
Navalny's recent claims that the Prime Minister controls a property empire amassed through a network of non-profit organisations have touched a raw nerve. His YouTube video has been viewed more than 11 million times. It says Dmitry Medvedev owns a collection of yachts, vineyards and mansions.
The size and the scope of Sunday's demonstrations appears to have taken Russia's authorities slightly by surprise. The dilemma for the Kremlin now is whether to make any concessions or whether to crack down, possibly a combination of the two.
Certainly there was no gentle touch on display in Moscow, where protests were biggest. At least 700 detentions have been reported in the capital. Among them, Navalny himself, bundled into a police van when he arrived at Pushkin Square. What to do with the activist is a problem the Kremlin doesn't seem to have an answer for yet. While he's endured harassment, here being covered in green disinfectant by unknown assailants last week, the Kremlin seems wary of making Navalny an opposition martyr by jailing him. But protests like these are the last thing Putin's government wants with presidential elections next year. Elections in which Alexei Navalny intends to stand as a candidate. Rory Challens, Al Jazeera, Moscow.
Security is being reviewed after people criticized Britain that a gate for vehicles was left open for a time during the deadly attack at Parliament. The attacker was shot dead after killing 4 people, including a policeman, on Wednesday when he rammed his car into pedestrians and then tried to force his way into Parliament in central London. Footage shows the gate was left undefended while the policeman was being helped. An account government and police officials said they could neither confirm nor deny until the investigation into the attack was completed.
For transgender and gender non-conforming youth, the ability to instantly connect with friends online means much more than just socializing and sending selfies. Experts say there is a growing transgender community on social media providing support to friends that they might not find in their own communities, a contrast to the higher likelihood of bullying teens face online. They aren't just turning to social media for emotional support, but also for answers as they try to make more sense of what they might be going through.
This town is the first in Somalia that refugees camp to when they return home from the Dadaab camp in northeastern Kenya. Some have been away for more than 10 years. They load up trucks that will take them on the next leg of their journey, carrying all they could from a camp they called home for so many years. They're apprehensive but also excited. I'll try to farm like before. I know there's a drought, but that's all right. It will come to end, says Isha Abdikadir. About 600 returnees were at the reception center when we visited. They gave up their refugee status back in Dadaab and received some startup cash and basic supplies from the United Nations Refugee Agency.
From here, these returnees will go farther south to Kismayo or Baidoa, where they'll be given a little more money by UNHCR and then make the difficult decision on whether to stay there or go to their villages.
Hassan Ahmed was 1 year old when his parents escaped Somalia's civil war in the 1990s. They're dead now, and he says there's nothing left for him at the camp in Kenya.
There are no jobs. Even if I have gone to school, I was hoping for resettlement to the US, but that is now not likely. So that's why I have decided to go back home.
In another corner of Doble, another group of displaced people. They've only recently arrived, escaping drought in parts of southern Somalia that the returnees are going back to. More than 500 are living rough in this settlement. If they can't get much help here, they say they'll try to go to Dadaab.
The drought is bad. People have lost their livestock and the land is bare. There's no water, there's cholera, and people are dying. The heat is taking a toll on the children.
Dozens of families like this one have already made it to the Dadaab camp in Kenya. Hawa Ali Nuro told us her 3-year-old boy died on the way here. Hungry and thirsty, the journey was just too tough for him.
We didn't come by car. We walked for 30 days. There's a woman who also gave birth on the way. We suffered a lot.
Back in Doble, the Somalis who've returned home prepare for a long, dusty, arduous journey to their final destinations. Those we talk to are not ruling out returning to Dadaab if things get too tough at home. Catherine Soy, Al Jazeera, Doble, Somalia.
South Korean prosecutors are seeking to arrest former President Park Geun-hye in the corruption scandal. And the Special Investigation Headquarters of the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office revealed in a statement that the warrant is to avoid possible attempts to destroy evidence. It also claims that Park has denied most of the criminal charges, and the move comes only 11 days after the Constitutional Court's ruling to remove Park from office.
Tens of thousands of pro-European Union protesters marched through London on Saturday, 4 days before Prime Minister Theresa May files Britain's formal exit papers to withdraw from the bloc. Protesters at the Unite for Europe march carried EU flags and anti-Brexit banners as they made their way through central London. Organizers say they will not be intimidated by Wednesday's terrorist attack, and the event was also intended to honor the victims. Police estimate 50,000 people took part in the march. It coincides with an EU leaders summit in Rome marking the 60th anniversary of the bloc's founding treaty.
7 years ago this month, Obamacare was signed into law over the profound objections of American people.
President Donald Trump's attempt to push through the repeal and replace of Obamacare didn't go over so well. The president sprinkled a little blame on the Democrats, whom, oddly, he was unable to persuade to join his cause. The president then took to Twitter and was quite positive. Trump tweeted, "Obamacare will explode, and we will all get together and piece together a great health care plan for the people. Do not worry."
United Airlines is facing backlash after 2 girls were denied entry onto a flight because they were wearing leggings. According to NBC News, the 2 girls were denied entry because their attire was considered improper by the airline. They were eventually allowed entry after they put dresses on over their clothing. A spokesman for United says the 2 passengers were flying as past travelers, meaning they were friends or relatives of a United Airlines employee. They were therefore subject to stricter attire requirements than normal customers of the airline. Social media users were quick to condemn the company, including gun rights activist Shannon Watts, who called the policy, quote, sexist.